Noon on Mount Cithaeron, and the heat sits still between the trunks of the old oaks. A hunter climbs the last stretch of the slope, with his bow held low in one hand. Below him, his hounds are working a scent, and their voices come up thin through the trees. He has hunted this ridge since he was a boy, and he knows every dry stream on it. The heat has pushed the deer down into the folds of the hill, where the shade lies. Sweat has soaked the leather strap where the quiver rides against his shoulder. He pushes a heavy branch of laurel aside with the back of his free hand. Behind the laurel, there is a cleft in the rock that he has never seen before. Water moves inside the cleft, and pale steam lifts off it into the shade. The rock above the water is smooth and white, cut by the spring over a long time. Ferns grow down to the waterline in a green wall along both sides of the pool. The hunter stops with one foot on wet stone and waits for his dogs to catch up. Then he takes one step forward, past the laurel, toward the moving water. Every bird above the spring goes quiet at once, in the same breath, together. The forest holds that silence, and we leave him there, before he has looked up. A courtyard in Thebes stands swept and bare, with 14 biers laid out in 2 rows. A woman kneels at the end of the row, with both hands flat on the hot stone. Plain cloth covers the smallest shapes, and the smallest have been set nearest to her. On a beach at Aulis, a girl in a wedding dress walks between 2 lines of soldiers. Behind her 1,000 ships sit at anchor with their sails hanging dead in the air. The soldiers keep their eyes on the sand as she passes them on the wet path. In a clearing in Arcadia, a she-bear lifts her head toward a young hunter at the tree line. The hunter is her son. He does not know that, and his spear is already raised. An altar in Sparta waits in the gray light, its stone worn smooth along the top. Boys stand in a ring around it, and not one of them looks at the priest. Those 4 pictures come from 4 regions of Greece and 4 different centuries. They share one author, and every guidebook will tell you that she protected the young. Her statues stand in quiet museum halls, a girl with a bow and a fawn at her knee. Marble hounds press against her leg, and her face is calm in every surviving copy. The farmers who left barley cakes at her altars would not recognize that face. They set those cakes on a flat stone at the edge of the plowed land and left quickly. They knew her as the reason one grove on the ridge above the village stayed uncut. Other gods punished what people did, and those crimes had names anyone could say. A man swore falsely at an altar, or took a herd, or struck down a guest at his table. Such a story ends with a wrong, and then a payment, and the shape of it makes sense. Artemis punished what people happened to be standing near, and that is a different thing. The hunter at the spring had stolen nothing. He turned left where the deer went right. A girl in her own company kept every promise she had made, and lost everything. 7 daughters at their looms in Thebes had never said the goddess's name aloud. A king in Calydon poured wine at every altar in his fields and missed one stone. The stone was small and half sunk in grass at the edge of the orchard wall. He remembered it that winter, when the thing came out of the trees at his gate. The Greeks understood this better than we do, and they built their habits around it. Hunters coming home through the pass hung the first kill on a branch and said nothing. Fishermen kept one corner of the beach clear of nets, where a small shrine stood. Families in Athens sent their daughters to a temple by the sea for a season of service. Girls in saffron dresses moved barefoot across that temple floor with their arms out. Nobody in these stories loves her, and the ancient writers do not pretend otherwise. They negotiate distance with her, the way a village negotiates with a mountain river. You do not love that river, you learn how far back to build your house from it. Every family on that bank knows the mark the water leaves in a bad spring. Her twin brother stands in the same myths, one step behind her in almost every version. He was born second, on the same island, in the same hour, to the same mother. His story ran on this channel already, and his anger had reasons you could follow. Her anger has no reasons, only conditions, and those conditions never changed once. The children of Niobe died on one afternoon, the sons by his hand, the daughters by hers. We walked that courtyard from the brother's side, and now we walk the other half. This story begins on a small island with almost no soil, no rivers, and no shade. A goddess in labor holds a palm trunk there, and a girl is born before her brother. It moves to a workshop under a mountain, where one-eyed smiths hammer silver flat. It moves to the spring on Cithaeron, and this time the picture does not cut away. It goes to a clearing in Arcadia, where a bear walks upright toward a hunting party. It goes to a courtyard in Thebes, where 7 looms stand loaded and unattended. It goes to a wheat field in Calydon, flattened in long tracks under a low sky. It goes to a tent on a beach, where a general reads a letter he has just written. It goes to a rock above the sea, where a giant and a goddess sit and talk. It ends in a winter sky over Greece, where that giant is still visible with his dogs. By the end, you will know why her temple stood on borders and on mountain passes. You will know why the city kept her at the tree line and her brother in the square. You will see why a hunter hangs his first kill on a branch and walks on without looking. The rule that every person in these stories learned too late is simple to state. Guilt was never the question with Artemis, and innocence was never a defense. The only question was distance, and the hunter on Cithaeron had just closed it. Before the island, there is a woman walking a coastline with nowhere to stop. Leto is heavily pregnant, and every headland she reaches has people standing on it. They watch her from the rocks with their arms folded, and they do not wave her in. Hera has told the earth that no land under the sun may give this woman a bed. Farmers pull their boats up the shingle and turn their backs to the water. Leto walks on past olive terraces and dry riverbeds with her hands under her belly. One place in that sea is not land in the ordinary sense, and Hera has missed it. Delos floats, a bare gray rock with no soil, no rivers, and no fields on it. Nothing grows there except a single palm, low and bent, close to the shore. Leto wades the last few steps and takes hold of that palm with both hands. The rock under her is warm, and the water around the island goes very still. Gulls lift off the stone, and the palm moves once, although there is no wind. A girl is born first, on bare rock, in the middle of the day, without a cry. One tradition says the labor is not finished, and that a second child is coming. The newborn girl stays at her mother's side, and she is the only help on the island. Swans come down and circle the shallows, while a boy is delivered onto the stone. So the goddess of childbirth learned the work before she was 1 day old. Women in Greece prayed to her at every birth for the next 1,000 years. A woman in a farm room grips the bedpost while an older woman says the name aloud. Those who came through it alive left folded clothes at the gate of her temple. The same goddess sent the arrows that took women out of the world without warning. Homer calls those deaths gentle, and no poet ever explains the contradiction. In one house, she stands at the foot of the bed as the help. In the next, as the cause. 3 years later, a small girl climbs into her father's lap on the mountain. Zeus sits on a stone seat with the child on his knee and listens to her. Zeus has many children, and this one has come up to him with a prepared list. The first item is her maidenhood, kept forever, and she asks for that before anything else. The second item is a bow with arrows, and she says the smiths can see to it. She wants a hunting tunic cut to the knee, so the hem will not catch on brush. She wants all the mountains of the world, every one of them, with no exception. As for cities, she tells her father he may give her whichever ones he likes. She will rarely come down into a town, and she says so to his face at 3. She asks for 60 companions, daughters of ocean, all of them 9 years old. She asks for 20 more nymphs from a Cretan river to mind her hounds and boots. Each of those 60 must be unmarried and must stay unmarried while she serves. That clause sounds like nothing in a nursery, and one day it will cost a girl everything. Zeus laughs, lifts her off his knee, and grants the whole list on those terms. He adds 30 cities that will know no other name and a share in many more. He gives her the roads and the harbors, the crossings, the places between places. A child of 3 has drawn the map of her own authority, and nobody edits it. Her first errand takes her to an island where smoke comes out of the hillside. Inside the hill, the Cyclopes stand at the anvil, each with one eye, all enormous. They are hammering a watering trough for the god of the sea when she walks in. The nymphs who came with her stop in the doorway and will not go any further. Callimachus says mothers use those smiths to frighten daughters who would not behave. The girl walks between the fires to the largest of them and asks for her bow. One tradition says she took a fistful of hair from his chest to steady herself. He never grew it back, and the poem keeps that detail on purpose. The smiths set the sea god's work aside and start on silver instead. A bow bends on the block, shafts are cut, and the fires go white at the edges. She leaves the mountain with a weapon built to a 3-year-old specification. In Arcadia, she stops at a cave where a goat-legged god is cutting up meat. He gives her hounds, 7 of them, faster than a shadow over open ground. 2 are marked black and white, and one of them can hold a lion in the hills. The dogs go quiet the moment she puts a hand on them, and they stay quiet. On the hills of Parasia, she finds 5 hinds grazing beside a dark river. Their horns are gold, and each of them stands taller at the shoulder than a bull. She runs 4 of them down on foot, with no net and no help from anyone. Those 4 are harnessed to her chariot, and the 5th is left loose in the hills. The 5th hind waits there for a man from Tiryns, who has not yet been born. In the Homeric hymn, she works the ridges above the tree line at evening. Artemis wears a dark green hunting tunic cut above the knee, with a silver bow in her hand. Her hair is tied back with a plain cord, and the quiver rides high between her shoulders. The mountain shakes, the wood goes dark, and the animals in it do not move. When she has finished, Artemis unstrings the bow and goes down the road to Delphi. The house of Apollo stands there with the lamps lit and the doors left open. Apollo waits in that doorway with a lyre in one hand and lets his sister pass. Muses and Graces come in from the side rooms and take her hands in the light. She hangs the bow on the wall inside and leads the dancing in his hall. That doorway is the only place in Greek poetry where she puts the weapon down. Everything after this is the carrying out of terms agreed on a knee at 3. There is no scene anywhere in which she reconsiders one line of that list. Other gods change their minds, take payment, are talked around, or lose interest. Zeus is argued out of 2 decisions in a single book by the women of his family. Apollo works a year in a mortal king's fields as a fine and comes back calm. Nobody in any surviving text renegotiates a single clause with his sister. The mountains are hers, and a hunter standing on one is a guest without a contract. The 60 must stay unmarried, and the terms do not ask how a vow came to be broken. Cities are handed out lightly because the goddess said she would rarely be in one. Her temples went up at the tree line and the harbor mouth, and the Greeks knew why. The child on that knee had never met a mortal and had no reason to want to. She set the terms of contact with people before she had seen a single one of them. Far below the mountain of the gods there is a ridge with laurel growing on it. On that ridge, a spring runs into a pool that no path leads down to. A hunter is standing at the edge of the water, with one foot on wet stone. The rules he is about to break were written by a child, and they still hold. The hunter on that ridge has a name, and in Thebes it is a well-known one. Actaeon is a grandson of Cadmus, raised in the palace, taught in the hills by a centaur. He learned tracking before he learned to read, and he has never been beaten at it. The morning has gone well for him, and the nets came up heavy twice before 9. His men are stacking spears against a rock and drinking from a skin in the shade. Mist has burned off the lower slopes, and the light on the leaves is flat and white. The pack is spread out below in the brush, working slowly, tongues out, tails moving. One poet writes out more than 30 of their names in a row, one after another. There is the black one from Sparta, the fast one, the shaggy one with the torn ear. Every dog in that pack knows his whistle, and every dog has fed from his hand. At noon, Actaeon calls the hunt off because the nets are wet and the day is done. He tells the men to roll everything up and says they will come back tomorrow. Then he walks off alone into a fold of the hills he does not remember crossing. This valley is thick with pine and dark cypress, and no axe has been in it. The ground slopes down, the air cools, and he hears water somewhere ahead of him. A wall of rock closes the valley, and a spring comes out under it into a pool. He pushes through the laurel at the entrance and takes the last step in. Inside the rock, Artemis is standing waist-deep in the pool with her hair loose. The nymphs of her company are around her, some holding cloth, some holding water. One of them sees him first, and the sound she makes brings all the heads round. They crowd in front of their mistress, and they are not tall enough to hide her. The tallest reaches her shoulder, and the light in the pool gives everything away. Color rises in the face of Artemis like the first red on clouds before sunrise. Her bow is on the rock behind her, out of reach, with the quiver beside it. The man in the entrance has not moved, and his own bow is still on his back. Artemis puts a hand into the water, brings it up, and throws the water at his face. She tells him to go and say that he has seen her bathing, if he can say it. The water runs down his cheek, and something starts to change under the skin. Bone lifts through the hair above his forehead and keeps lifting, branched, hard. His neck stretches, his ears go up and back, and the pool shows him a stag. His hands come down on the stone and are hooves before they touch it. Spots come up along his back and flanks in a pattern he has hunted for years. She gives him the speed of a deer as well, and that is the cruel part. He turns and runs because a deer runs, and he cannot decide otherwise. Water sounds behind him, then birds go up out of the pines in a gray sheet. He tries to say his own name at the top of the rise, and no sound comes out. Down in the valley the pack lifts a scent, and 50 dogs turn at once. Leashes that were coiled on the ground go tight and then drag through the leaves. The men shout after them and cannot see what is moving through the brush. One of them cups his hands and calls Actaeon to come up and watch this. The whole hillside is calling for a man to come and see the best run of the year. The pines take the noise and hold it. Then the noise thins. Then there is nothing. Above the valley the sun sits still, and the smoke from Thebes goes up straight. Nothing moves on the ridge for a long time except the hawk turning over the trees. In the evening, the men come back down the pass carrying the nets, and one spear too many. They wait at the house that night with the doors open and the lamps burning. The dogs do not come back either, and no one in the yard says the obvious thing. For days after, the pack works the hills, nose down, quartering the same ground. They come to the kennel gate at dusk, sit in front of it, and howl at the wood. One tradition says a centaur made a likeness of the man to quiet them down. The dogs went to the likeness, put their noses on it, and would not leave the place. That image is the last picture the sources give us, and it is not of him. Some in Thebes said afterwards that he had brought it on himself with his mouth. One tradition says he boasted that he hunted better than the goddess did. Another says he had looked at a woman of the family in a way he should not have. Ovid keeps none of it, and states plainly that the fault was in his luck. He calls it error, the wrong turn, the foot put down on the wrong path. Then the poem says something that most retellings leave out completely. Opinion in the story itself was divided about whether the goddess was fair. Some thought the punishment was too heavy for what the man had done. Others said it fitted her, and that she was strict and that everyone knew it. Both groups are talking about a hunter who walked into a valley at midday. He broke no oath, took nothing, spilled nothing, insulted no altar, killed no sacred beast. He turned left at a fold in the hill where he should have turned right. That is the whole indictment, and the sentence was carried out inside 1 hour. In the myths of other gods, there is usually a moment where a man could stop. A warning comes in a dream, a stranger at the door, a priest with a bad reading. Actaeon gets no dream, no priest, and no stranger anywhere in the valley. The first he knows of the rule is the moment he has already broken it. His grandfather built the walls of Thebes, and the city stood for centuries. The family kept his story and told it to boys going out on their first hunt. The lesson they took was not about virtue, and it was not about respect. It was about which valleys you walk into and which ones you go around. Every hunter in Boeotia after that knew the shape of the ground near that spring. The path in from the ridge closed over with brush, and nobody cut it back. Water still came out of the rock, and the pool stayed clear, and no one drank from it. That is what happens to a stranger who comes too close to her by accident. The next story is harder because it happens to someone who was never a stranger. She had walked at the goddess's shoulder for years, and she had kept every promise. The vow that destroyed her was not one she broke, and the sources are clear about that. Arcadia is high country, and the hunting there runs along ridges above the oak woods. 60 young women move through those woods behind Artemis in a long line. They carry short bows, and their tunics are pinned at the shoulder with plain metal. None of them wears a ring, and none of them will while she keeps her place in the line. That was the arrangement made on a knee on the mountain, and it has no clauses under it. The best of the 60 comes from an Arcadian house, and her name is Callisto. Callisto wears a short, sand-colored tunic with a wide leather belt and tall, laced boots. She carries a plain wooden bow, and her hair is tied back with a strip of hide. She can find water in a dry month and read a tract that is 2 days old. Artemis keeps her at the front, which the others notice and quietly accept. On the ridges of Minalis, they run a stag out of the pines before breakfast. At night, they sleep on the ground with the dogs around them and the fires low. This is the whole of her life, and by every account, she is content inside it. On one hot noon, the party breaks up, and the girl goes into a grove alone. She unstrings her bow, lays it in the grass, and stretches out on her cloak. Cicadas run in the pines above her, and the light comes down in broken pieces. Someone walks in through the trees, wearing the face of Artemis herself. The voice is right, the step is right, and the bow across the shoulder is right. Callisto stands up smiling, and says she is glad to see her mistress up here. Ovid writes that she fought, and that no girl could have fought harder than she did. What happens in that grove stays between the trees, and the poem moves past it fast. When the picture returns, she is walking out, with her cloak pulled crooked at the neck. She has almost left the bow lying in the grass, and she goes back for it. From that day she walks at the end of the line instead of the front of it. She keeps to the edge of the fire at night, and answers only when spoken to. Her tunic is loosened at the waist a little more each month and pinned lower. She stops swimming with the others and drinks upstream, standing apart from them. Nobody in that company can be told, because the terms of service are not open to talk. 9 months go past on the ridges, through heat and rain and 2 turns of season. Then a hunt ends at noon by a cold stream running out of a mountain wall. Artemis says the water is good and the day is long and they should all go in. 60 girls set down their bows and start unpinning at the shoulder in the shade. Callisto stays back on the bank with both hands held flat against her sides. The others laugh, take her by the arms, and pull her down to the water with them. Cloth comes away, and the thing she has carried for 9 months is in the open. She stands in the shallows with her arms crossed and her eyes on the current. Artemis looks at her once and does not ask a single question about it. One hand comes up and points away from the stream, toward the trees, and that is all. Ovid gives the order in 6 words, and the sense is to go and not foul this water. Callisto climbs the bank, picks up her bow, and walks out of her own life. Behind her, the water closes over and the hunt goes on without a gap in it. In a cave that autumn, a boy is born to her, and the herdsmen call him Arcus. Then Hera arrives at that cave, because Hera has been counting the months. Hair comes up along the girl's arms, coarse and dark, from wrist to shoulder. Her hands turn under her and take the ground with claws instead of fingers. The mouth she is begging with widens, and the sound out of it is not speech. A large brown bear stands on all fours there, and the mind inside it has not changed. One tradition says the hand was Hera's, and another gives it to the goddess she served. Apollodorus knows a version in which the arrow that ended it came from Artemis. Every version agrees on the shape of the result, and not one of them asks her anything. She lives 15 years in the woods of Arcadia as an animal that remembers. She runs from dogs, and she once knew every dog in the district by its voice. She hides from hunters on the pass, and she trained beside those men's fathers. She is afraid of other bears because she is not one of them and never learned how. At night she comes down near the houses and lies in the brush above the smoke. Arcus grows up in a herdsman's house and learns those hills as his mother once did. Arcus is 15 when he goes out with a spear on the ridges above the valley. A large brown bear comes out of the pines onto the path in front of him and stops. It stands and looks at him, and it does none of the things a bear should do. The animal takes one step forward, then another, straight at a boy with a spear. Arcas sets his feet and brings the point up level with the height of its chest. Ovid holds the picture there, on a sun about to make a very ordinary mistake. Wind takes both of them off the mountain before the point can go anywhere. Zeus lifts them into the sky and sets them among the fixed stars together. Two shapes come out that winter over the Arcadian ridges and stay all night. Every herdsman in Greece steered by them, and every sailor learned them first. Even that is not the end, because Hera takes one more step after that. Hera walks down to the old god of the sea and asks him for a small favor. Those two are never to sink into his water the way the other stars do. So the bear turns above the pole all year and is never allowed to bathe again. A punishment that started at a stream in Arcadia is still running in the sky. Now look at what the girl in this story actually did with her own hands. She kept the vow she made on the day she joined that line of 60. She had no warning because the thing that came for her wore her mistress's face. There was no test she could have passed, and no rule she could have kept better. Artemis did not ask who had done it, and no source says she asked later. The terms set at 3 years old say, the 60 must be maidens while they serve. They do not say what happens when a vow is taken from a girl by someone stronger. In a court, that gap is the entire case, and in Arcadia, it was never raised. 2 people broke that vow, and only one of them was standing in the water. The one who was punished spent 15 years with a human mind in an animal body. The one who broke it kept his throne, and later hung her in the sky as a favor. There is a reading of this story in which the goddess is the injured party. There is no version anywhere in which she asks Callisto what happened in the grove. This is a servant, inside her own company, punished for what was done to her. The next story moves further out, into a courtyard the goddess has never entered. The people in it are not hunters, not nymphs, and not sworn to her in any way. They are children, at their looms, and their mother has said the wrong thing at breakfast. Thebes on a festival morning has smoke going up from every side street at once. Women are walking to the altar of Leto with laurel in their hands and incense in cloth. A prophet's daughter has called them out, and the whole city is answering her. They tie the laurel into their hair at the gate and go up the steps in order. Then the doors of the palace open behind them, and the queen comes out onto the stairs. Niobe wears a robe worked with gold thread that catches the light on every fold. She stops the procession with one hand and asks them what they think they are doing. She points at herself, at the palace, at the fields her husband's music built walls around. Her father dined with gods. Her grandfather carries the sky on his shoulders. Then she counts, and the counting is the part the Greeks never forgot. 7 sons in that house, and 7 daughters, all of them alive that morning. Against 14 she sets a goddess, with exactly 2 children and no city. She says she could lose several and still stand higher than the mother of twins. Homer counts 12 children in his version, and Ovid gives 14 in his. Every version keeps the arithmetic, because the arithmetic is what she was punished for. The women untie the laurel and go home with their incense still wrapped in cloth. On a mountain far from Thebes, a woman in a plain robe stops walking and listens. Leto tells her son and her daughter what has been said about them by name. The son answers that talking about it only puts the answer off, and he goes. What happened outside the walls that day is a story we have told from his side. The short version is horses, an open field for exercise, and a morning that ends early. By noon, the gates of Thebes are open, and men are carrying the sons in. The city puts down 7 biers in the palace courtyard in a single row. The king does not live out that day, and the sources say very little about how. Servants bring water and cloth and set the lamps out along the colonnade. Above the courtyard, the looms of the household are still standing where they were. 7 daughters were working at them that morning, and the wool is still on the beams. The girls come down in black, with their hair unpinned, and stand along the row. They have not spoken to the goddess, or about her, or near her in their lives. They kneel by their brothers with their hands on the wood, and they stay there. Their mother comes out into the courtyard and looks at the row for a long time. Then she says it again, and this is the detail most retellings quietly drop. She tells the sky that, even now, ruined, she still has more children than Leto. The daughters are at the biers, in mourning, when their mother repeats the boast. This time Artemis comes, and she sends no warning of any kind ahead of her. On the roof above the colonnade, Artemis stands with the bow already in her hand. A shuttle drops out of a girl's hand up in the colonnade and rolls across the floor. It comes to a stop against the foot of a slave, who does not move to pick it up. Threads pull loose on the loom above and hang down over the empty bench. In the courtyard, one girl leans forward against a bier, as if she has grown tired. A second sits back on her heels beside her and puts one hand on the stone. A third is halfway across the yard toward them and stops in the middle of it. Nobody in the doorway makes a sound, because there is nothing to see and no enemy. The lamps go on burning in the colonnade, with the wool swinging above them. The row of 7 biers is still there, and the courtyard around it is emptying. 6 of the daughters are down, and the smallest one is still on her feet. She runs to her mother, and her mother sits and pulls the child into her lap. Niobe puts her arms over the girl and folds her body forward across her. Then the Queen of Thebes asks for something, out loud, for the first time in the story. She asks for one to be left, the smallest one, just this one, and no more. Ovid lets her finish the sentence, and the child in her arms is already gone. 14 dead in one day, and the last of them died during a request. The mother stays sitting in the courtyard between the 2 rows and does not get up. Wind comes over the roof, and her hair does not move in it at all. The color goes out of her face, and her eyes stop tracking the light. Her hands are on her knees, and the fingers do not close when the lamps go out. A whirlwind takes her off the courtyard floor and carries her out of the country. It sets her down on a mountaintop in the land she was born in, facing east. There is a rock on Mount Sipylus with water coming out of the face of it. Guides showed that rock to travelers for centuries as the queen who counted wrong. Pausanias went up to look at it, and he tells you exactly what he found. Standing close, he saw a cliff and no woman in it, and nothing like a face. He walked back down the slope, turned around, and there she was, weeping. Homer puts this story in the mouth of Achilles, in a tent, at night, near the end. He is talking to an old king who has come to ask for the body of his son. He tells him that even Niobe, with all of them dead, remembered to eat. In Homer, the corpses lie 9 days because the people around them are turned to stone. On the 10th day, the gods themselves come down and put the children in the ground. That is the story the Greeks kept, and now count what the daughters had done. They did not attend the procession, and they were not on the palace stairs. They did not repeat their mother's arithmetic to anyone in the city. When the sister came for them, they were kneeling at their brother's funeral. The insult was not even aimed at her, and nobody in the sources says otherwise. A woman had said something about Leto, on a step, in front of a crowd. The goddess who answered it was not present, not named, and not asked to come. She came because her mother was insulted, and she came to the daughter's side of the house. Apollo took the half of the family that was outside the walls on horses. She took the half that was indoors, at looms, in black, in the middle of a funeral. There is no scene in which she looks at the children, and no line she gives them. In the Actaeon story, a man walked into her valley and closed the distance himself. In the Callisto story, a servant was inside her company under an oath she had set. Here, the distance is a whole city, and the connection is one sentence at a breakfast table. The next case is thinner still, and it is the one I find hardest to sit with. Nobody says anything at all, and nobody comes near her, and nobody breaks a vow. A king walks through his own orchard in autumn with a jug in his hand. He pours at every altar on his land, in order, the way he does every year. He misses one small stone at the edge of a field, and he does not notice. Calydon in autumn is a good country, with vines on the slopes and grain below them. The harvest is in, the presses are working, and the whole valley smells of must. King Aeneas goes out at first light to make the offerings he makes every year. He carries a jug, and a boy walks behind him with cakes on a flat board. They stop at the altar of the sky god, and then at the altar by the spring. They pour for the god of the sea, for the corn goddess, for the god of the vines. The king works his way along the field walls in the order his father used. There is one small altar at the top of the orchard, half sunk, with grass over the base. Homer says it plainly, that either the king forgot it or he did not notice it. No priest stops him, no bird calls, and the boy behind him says nothing at all. They walk back down to the house, and the day goes on like any other day. 2 weeks later, a herdsman on the upper slope hears something moving in the oaks. What comes out of the trees is a boar, and it stands taller at the shoulder than a bull. Its bristles stand up along the spine like a row of spear shafts set in a wall. The tusks are the length of a forearm, and its breath scorches the leaves it passes. It goes down the hill through the vineyard, and the vines come up out of the ground. By morning, a season of work is lying flat in long tracks under a gray sky. The olives are next, then the barley, then the pens where the oxen are kept. Dogs will not go up the slope, and the shepherds come down and stay down. Farmers move their families inside the walls of the town and sleep in the market. The gates are shut in daylight, which is a thing that happens only in a war. Men stand on the wall at dawn and watch a dark shape working along the terraces. Nobody sows that autumn, and everybody in the valley understands what that means. The king's son sends word out across Greece and asks for hunters, not soldiers. They come in over 3 weeks, and the list of them is a list of famous names. Theseus comes from Athens, and Jason comes with 2 of his old crew. The twins from Sparta come, and a young man from Pylos who will live to be very old. Peleus is there, and his brother, and the man who will be the father of Achilles. One more hunter comes down from the Arcadian hills, and she comes alone. Atalanta was left on a mountain as an infant and raised in the woods by a bear. Her hair is in a plain knot, her cloak is held by a single clasp at the throat. She carries an ivory quiver, and she is the only woman standing in the yard. The king's brothers say out loud that a hunting party is no place for a girl. Meleager, the king's son, wears a short brown tunic and carries a heavy boar spear. Meleager looks at her once and says she is coming with them. That decision costs more than anything else that happens in the next 3 days. They find the boar in a marsh where willows grow thick down to the water. The nets go out along the edge, the dogs are unleashed, and the line closes in. It comes out of the reeds at the line instead of away from it, at a run. 2 spears go over its back, one sticks in a tree, and the front of the line breaks. A man goes down in the willows, and the poem does not follow him after that. Another is caught against the water, and the hunters behind him pull back to the bank. Nestor puts his spear in the mud and goes up into a tree, and he is not ashamed. The dogs are worse than useless in the reeds, and the men are shouting over each other. Then a woman steps clear of the willows, with an arrow already on the string. Her shot goes in behind the ear and stands there, and the animal turns toward it. That is the first hit of the hunt, and every source agrees on whose it was. The line reforms around the turn she has made, and spears go in from both sides. Meleager comes in close and finishes it with his own spear, in front of everyone. The marsh goes quiet, the dogs come back, and the men stand around the thing they killed. He takes the hide, which is the whole prize, and the head with it. Then he carries the hide across the mud and puts it into Atalanta's hands. He tells the field that the first hit was hers, and the honor goes with the first hit. The 2 brothers of his mother step forward and take the hide back off her. They tell her that a woman does not carry a trophy out of a hunt in their country. What happens next in that marsh is short, and it stays inside the family. The 2 uncles do not walk home to Calydon with the others that evening. Homer tells this part differently, as a war between 2 peoples over the hide and the head. In his version, there is no hunt scene at all, only the boar, the quarrel, and the years of fighting. In the town, Althea is on her way to the temple to give thanks for her son. She meets the biers of her brothers coming the other way through the gate. Althea turns around in the street and goes home, and she does not go to the temple. Now the story reaches back to the night her son was born, and to a fire in that house. 3 women stood at the hearth and put a log on the flame while the child cried. They said the boy would live exactly as long as that piece of wood held out. His mother took it out of the fire with her hands and carried it away smoking. It has been in a chest under her bed for a lifetime, wrapped in cloth. Althea takes it out now and stands in front of the hearth with it for a long time. Ovid gives her a speech in which she is a sister and a mother in alternate lines. Althea builds the fire up first, then puts the log down, then takes it back twice. On the 4th attempt, she leaves it in the coals and steps away from the hearth. Out in the camp, her son is sitting at a fire with the hide beside him in the grass. He puts a hand to his chest and cannot say what is wrong with him. The log settles, the flames go down through it, and the room fills with gray light. He burns without a wound anywhere on him, and no one in the camp can help. The hearth in the palace goes to ash, and the shield in the grass is not picked up. His mother does not live out that night, and the sources leave the manor alone. His sisters cry over him until the gods turn them into birds and take them away. Those birds were still called by his name in Greece hundreds of years later. Count the cost of the morning when a king walked past a small altar in his orchard. A season of harvest gone, the sowing missed, the herds gone, the fields flattened. A hunt that killed men from 6 cities, a war over a hide, 2 of the queen's brothers, the heir to Calydon dead, the queen dead, the daughters gone out of the house. Aeneas lived on and lost his throne, and his line went out of that country. Now go back through everything you just heard and find the goddess in it. She has no scene, no line of speech, no arrow, and no appearance in any version. She does not warn the king, does not name a price, and does not come to the marsh. An animal walked out of a wood, and the family did the rest of the work themselves. That is why this is the most frightening story in the whole collection. The next one is different, because this time she names a price out loud. A commander says 4 words too many in a grove, and a priest repeats the answer. Aulis is a beach on a narrow channel, with hills behind it and an island opposite. In an ordinary summer, a few fishing boats work that water and nothing else moves. This summer, the whole coast is ships, drawn up in rows with their sterns to the land. More than 1,000 of them are counted in the catalogue that Homer gives us. Behind the ships, there is a city of tents running back into the pine and scrub. 60,000 men are living on that sand, waiting for a wind to take them east. The wind at Aulis comes off the strait in the morning, and it has never failed anyone. Their commander goes inland one day with a bow, because the waiting is long. He walks up through the pines to a clearing where the grass has not been grazed. Nobody keeps goats in that clearing, and there is a small altar under the trees. A stag comes out onto the open ground with its head down and does not run. Agamemnon puts 1 arrow in it at a distance his own men would call luck. He says out loud, in front of the men with him, that the shot was perfect. Then he says the goddess of that grove could not have made it any better herself. The men laugh because commanders say things like that after a good morning. They carry the animal down to the beach, and the day ends the way days do. Sometime that night the wind stops, and it stops between one breath and the next. In the morning, the pennants on the mastheads are hanging straight down the poles. The channel is flat, the sails do not move, and the smoke from the fires goes up. That is day 1, and nobody on the beach thinks about it for very long. By day 10, the ships are swinging on their anchors with nothing to swing on. By day 20, the water barrels are being counted twice and the stores are opened. 60,000 men eat a supply train every week, whether they sail or not. The bread goes first, then the fresh meat, then the discipline that holds a camp. Fights start over water cues and over dice and over nothing at all. Men swim to the island and back for something to do, and some do not come back. Sickness moves through the lines the way it always does where water stands. The ship's timbers dry out on the sand, and the pitch runs in the heat. Crews go up the coast to fish and come back with less than they used. Kings from Crete and Pylos and Salamis come to the commander's tent and ask him when. He tells them that the wind is not his to give, and they go back to their fires. His brother comes every day, because his brother is why the fleet is there. There is a seer in that camp, and the whole army knows his tent by sight. Calchas has been reading the birds over the strait every morning for 6 weeks. Calchas wears a plain white robe and carries a bundle of laurel under one arm. He asks for a private meeting, and the commander lets 3 men into the tent. What is said inside is heard by 4 people, and one of them is writing nothing down. Calchas names the cause first, which is a shot and a sentence in a grove. Then he names the price, and the price is the commander's oldest daughter. She is to be brought to Aulis and given at the altar of the goddess he insulted. After that, the wind will come back, and not 1 day before it. Agamemnon leaves the tent and walks the length of the beach and back. Euripides has him refuse outright and order the army broken up and sent home. His brother tells him the fleet will not go home, and that the men will hear of it. The man from Ithaca points out that the army now contains 4 people who know. 4 people become 40 by morning, and 4,000 by the end of the week. An army that has waited 6 weeks does not need much before it turns on a commander. So the commander goes back to his tent alone, and sits down with a wax tablet. There is a lamp on the table, and a ring on his hand for the seal. He writes to his wife in Mycenae that their daughter is to come to the camp. He writes that a marriage has been arranged, and that the fleet will not sail without it. The name he puts in the letter is the best name in the whole fleet, Achilles. That name will convince a mother, satisfy a girl, and explain the delay to the army. The man whose name it is has not been asked, and does not know he is in the letter. Achilles is in his own lines that night with his men, arguing about the wind. The tablet is sealed, and a runner takes it up the road out of the camp in the dark. It is 4 days to Mycenae by the coast road, and the runner does not stop. The great gate at Mycenae has 2 lions over it, and a courtyard behind it. Clytemnestra reads the tablet in that courtyard, with both hands flat on the wax. Clytemnestra wears a deep blue chiton pinned with heavy bronze at both shoulders. Her daughter is to marry the best fighter in Greece, and the fleet is waiting. The house turns over in a day, because a royal wedding needs a great deal of cloth. Chests are packed with linen, and with the girl's own weaving from the last 2 years. Women fill the jars for the wedding water, and load them into a covered cart. Iphigenia is old enough to marry, and young enough to have never left the district. Iphigenia wears a saffron wool dress pinned at the shoulders, with her hair in one braid. She has heard of Achilles the way everyone has heard of Achilles, as a name. Her friends walk with the cart to the edge of the town and then stop at the wall. Clytemnestra brings the baby with her, because there is nobody to leave him with. Orestes travels the whole road to Aulis in his mother's arms in a moving cart. Down in the camp, the commander is sitting up again with a second tablet. He writes that there has been a mistake, and that the journey is to be cancelled. An old servant takes it out on the road at night with instructions to run. His brother's men stop the servant on that road and bring the tablet back. The 2 brothers have their argument in the open, between the tents, in front of guards. While they are arguing, there is noise from the far end of the beach, cheering. A cart with a covered top is come down the track from the hills to the sand. Men climb the sterns of the ships to look at it and shout the girl's name. Iphigenia gets down and runs the last of it to her father and puts her arms round him. He stands there with his hand on her head and does not look at his brother. She asks him why he has been away so long and why his eyes are wet. He tells her that a commander has a great deal to think about before a voyage. She asks where they will live afterwards, and he says she will go somewhere far. He says it is a voyage he cannot come on with her, and she laughs at that. Clytemnestra is already unloading, because a mother has questions about the ceremony. Who cuts the hair? Who carries the fire? Who leads the dance? Where is the groom's father? She asks whether the sacrifice comes before the feast or after it, as mothers do. The commander answers 3 of those questions and goes to find the seer. Down the beach, a young man is walking up from his lines to complain again. His men have been sitting on the sand for 6 weeks, and they want to sail or go home. He comes to the commander's tent and finds a woman coming out of it. She takes his hands and calls him her son, and says the house is honored. He tells her his name is Achilles, son of Peleus, and asks who she is. She says she knows exactly who he is, because he is marrying her daughter tomorrow. Achilles stands in the doorway of that tent with a woman holding both his hands. He tells her again that no marriage has been discussed with him by anyone. An old servant comes out from behind the canvas and says he will explain it. He tells the queen why her daughter was really brought 4 days down the coast. Clytemnestra goes down on the sand in front of a man half her age and takes his knees. She has no one else in that camp, and she says so, and she does not get up. Achilles hears that his name was written on a tablet and used to bring a girl to a grove. His answer in Euripides is short, and he swears by his mother in the sea. Nobody is taking that girl anywhere while he is standing on the beach. Then Agamemnon comes back from the seer's tent and finds his family waiting. His wife asks him one question, and she asks it in front of the guards. He says the fleet cannot sail, and that the army has been on the sand for 6 weeks. She reminds him whose daughter this is, and how many children she has borne him. The girl comes out of the tent with the baby on her hip, and stands between them. She puts the baby down at her father's feet, and holds on to his hand. Euripides gives her a speech that is not about honor or duty at all. She reminds him that she was the first to call him father in that house. She reminds him that he used to promise her a good husband and a long life. She says the sweetest thing anyone has is to look at the light of an ordinary day. She tells him that a bad life is still better than the finest death, and she means it. Her father does not look at her while she is speaking, and he answers the ground. He says it is not his brother forcing this, and it is not ambition either. He says the whole of Greece is standing behind him with its arms folded. If he refuses, the army will not go home. It will come up the beach to this tent. They will take the girl anyway, and they will take the rest of the family with her. Achilles has gone down to his own lines while this is happening, to make his case. He comes back with a helmet under his arm and a mark on his forehead. He told his own men what was being done, and his own men shouted him down. The soldiers he brought from home were the first to say he should be stoned. He stands at the tent with his armor on and says he will fight the whole camp alone. That offer is on the table, from the best fighter in Greece, in front of the family. Then Iphigenia, who has been listening to all of it, says she has changed her mind. She asks her mother to stop crying and asks the young man to put the helmet down. She says the whole of Greece is looking at her, and she cannot fight the whole of Greece. She says no man is going to die on the sand today for the sake of her one life. She tells her mother not to hate her father, and not to wear black afterwards. She asks her not to cut her hair for her, and to raise the boy without this in the house. Then she walks out of the tent and up the path toward the grove by herself. The army is standing on both sides of that path, all the way up from the beach. 60,000 men are not making a sound, which is a thing that never happens. Iphigenia is wearing a saffron robe, and the hem drags in the dust as she goes. The priest is waiting at the altar with the basket and the water already prepared. Her father is standing to one side of the altar with his hands down at his sides. The blade comes up, and the commander turns his back and pulls his robe over his face. 10,000 men in the front ranks look at the ground between their feet. Aeschylus stops there, and his chorus says it did not see what came next. That is the oldest full account we have, and it refuses to describe the moment. Euripides sends a messenger back down to the tent with a different report. The messenger says, the blade came down, and the priest looked into the basket. On the stone there was a hind, large, still moving, and the girl was not there. He says the whole army saw it, and that the seer explained it as her doing. One tradition says, Artemis carried the girl away to a country at the far end of the sea. In that country, Iphigenia became a priestess in a temple of the same goddess. She served for years at an altar where strangers off the ships did not fare well. The goddess who asked for her kept her, alive, at a door, on a border, in the dark. Euripides then does something that most retellings of this leave out completely. Her mother hears the messenger and says the story may be a comfort and nothing more. The play does not tell you which of them is right, and it ends without settling it. Aeschylus has no hind anywhere, and the army that sailed carried his version with them. Whatever happened on that stone, the next part is agreed by everyone. The wind came back that same hour off the strait the way it always had. Canvas moved on the mastheads, the ropes started knocking, the smoke bent east. Men who had been sitting for 6 weeks were pulling ships down the sand by evening. The fleet went out through the channel in a line, and the beach was empty by dark. What that beach cost took 10 years to be paid, and it was not paid at Troy. A man came home to Mycenae with the wind behind him and a crown on his head. His wife met him at the gate with cloth on the ground and a bath drawn upstairs. We told that homecoming in another video, and it is enough to say, she remembered Aulis. Now think about the price itself, because the price is the point of this story. Gods in Greek stories usually ask for things a rich man can arrange in a week: 100 cattle at the altar, a bronze tripod, a temple wall, games every 4 years. Poseidon takes a ring and a bull, and Apollo takes ransom and 100 beasts. Artemis asked a commander for the one item in his life he could not replace. She did not ask for the fleet, or the treasury, or the crown, or the brother who started it. She asked for the daughter, by name, and left the father to carry the decision. Then look at who actually gave offense in that grove above the beach. A man with a bow said 4 words about a shot in front of his own officers. The person who walked up the path in the saffron robe had never seen the grove. She was in Mycenae at her loom when her father was making that joke. This is the same shape as Arcadia, moved 1 seat along the table. Actaeon paid for his own wrong turn, and that was already hard enough. Callisto paid for something done to her by somebody stronger than she was. Iphigenia paid for a sentence spoken by her father in a country she had never visited. Aeschylus makes it worse, because in his version there is no boast at all. In his account, 2 eagles take a pregnant hare in front of the army before they sail. The goddess is angry at what happened to the animal and the hare's unborn young. The price for that is a girl at an altar, and the seer says so out loud. One tradition blames a hunter's mouth, the other blames 2 birds and an omen. In both of them, the fleet sails, and in neither of them is the guilty party on the stone. There is one story left where she loses something instead of taking it. It is the only place in Greek poetry where the sources allow her to grieve. Orion is the largest human figure in Greek myth, and the sources agree on very little else. He is a hunter out of Boeotia, taller than the trees he walks between at night. His club is solid bronze, and he carries it the way other men carry a stick. 2 dogs work in front of him, and no animal in Greece has ever outrun them. One tradition says his father was the god of the sea, and that he could walk on water. Fishermen in that story see a man crossing the strait at chest height in the dark. He went to the island of Chios once and asked a king there for a daughter. The king kept putting the wedding off and served him a great deal of wine. What that king did to him on the beach that night is ugly, and it is brief. Orion woke up on the sand at dawn, unable to see anything at all. He waded off the island toward the sound of hammers on the next coast. There he took a boy up onto his shoulder and told him to face the sunrise. He walked east across the water with the boy steering him by the light. The sun came up on the 2 of them and gave the hunter his eyes back. That is the man who was walking the ridges of Crete when the story turns. Artemis is hunting that same ground with her 60, and they meet the way hunters meet. Nobody in the sources describes the conversation, but they hunt together after that. They drive the high ground together for weeks, and the game comes down the passes. He is the only mortal in Greek poetry who can keep her pace on a mountain. They rest on a headland above the sea where the wind comes up the rock face. 2 hunters sit on that headland with the dogs lying flat between them. The sources never call this a marriage, and no version has her break the vow. What they do give is the only friendship she is ever recorded as having. Somewhere in that period, her brother starts taking an interest in the arrangement. Homer says only that the gods were annoyed that a goddess had taken a mortal to her side. The rest of the brother's part comes from later writers, and it comes in pieces. Now the story splits into 4 versions, and each one ends the same way. One tradition says the hunter made a boast on a ridge in front of his dogs. He said he would kill every animal that walks on the surface of the earth. The ground opened under his feet, and a scorpion came out of the crack. A creature the size of a hand stopped a man who had no equal in the world. Some tellers make the earth send it, and some put the order in the goddess's mouth. In the second version, the goddess of the dawn takes him with her to a small island. The gods object, and Homer's line is that Artemis came to Ortygia and shot him. Those are the gentle arrows again, the same phrase used for women who die suddenly. In the third version, there is a day of hunting and a brother who arrives at midday. Apollo has been watching his sister and this friendship for a considerable time. Apollo points out to sea, at a dark speck a very long way out in the water. He tells her that no archer alive could put an arrow into a mark at that range. Artemis takes the shot, because she has never once declined a claim like that. The mark goes under, and the surface closes, and the sea comes in flat and gray. Artemis goes out into the water later and brings back what she hit. Her brother is not in the picture by then, and no version gives him a punishment. In the fourth version, the hunter laid hands on a girl in her company. Apollodorus gives that one, and gives a discus contest as an alternative to it. 4 versions, and in 3 of them, the arrow in the water is hers. There is no version in which the two of them get old on that headland. Then comes the only scene in Greek myth where this goddess is allowed to grieve. She does not argue, does not go to her father, does not ask for anything back. Artemis takes him off the beach and puts him into the sky over the winter of the world. He goes up whole, with the belt, the blade at his hip, and the club in his hand. Both dogs go up with him, and take their places at his heel behind him. The larger dog carries the brightest star anyone in Greece could see. Farmers watch that star come up before dawn at the end of every summer. Homer says it shines clearly and brings fever with it, and calls it a bad sign. So the friend goes into the sky, and the dog at his foot becomes a warning. If you go outside in January, anywhere in the northern half of the world, he is there. 3 stars in a short line, the shoulders above, the feet below, the club raised. He is the easiest figure in the sky to find, and children learn him first. There is one more arrangement in that sky, and it belongs to the first version. The scorpion was set on the opposite side of the wheel from the hunter. When it comes up over the horizon in summer, he is already going down in the west. They have never shared the sky for one night in 3,000 years of watching. The bear in the north is not allowed to go into the sea and wash. The hunter in the south is not allowed to be in the sky with the thing that stopped him. Her stories keep ending in the stars, and the stars keep the terms running. There is one last picture, and it comes from the 12th book of the Odyssey's neighbor. A living man goes down into the country of the dead and looks around a gray field. He sees a huge figure driving wild animals across that field with a bronze club. Orion is hunting down there, with the same weapon, herding the same beasts. The Greeks kept him in the sky and in the underworld at the same time and did not mind. Now put the friendship next to everything else in this video and the pattern closes. A hunter came close to her by accident on Cithaeron and did not come home. A girl stood at her shoulder for years and finished as an animal in the woods. A commander's daughter walked up a path in a saffron robe and out of her own country. And the one man she chose herself was shot in open water, possibly by her own hand. There is no story in which somebody near her ends the story near her and unharmed. She is not cruel in the way a tyrant is cruel, and she takes no pleasure in any of it. She is the wild country itself, and the wild country does not adjust its terms for anyone. A river will drown the man who loves it exactly as fast as the man who ignores it. The Greeks who told these stories understood that better than the people who inherited them. Nobody built a temple to her because she had been kind to somebody in that district. They built where the fields ended, and they built to fix the line between the two worlds. There is one more part of the story, and it is the part almost nobody covers. It is not a myth at all. It is the daily practice of ordinary Greek towns. Girls in Athens, boys in Sparta, and hunters coming down a pass in the evening. That is how people actually lived beside a goddess who punished proximity itself. Everything up to here is poetry, and now we go to the accounts and the calendars. 20 miles east of Athens, there is a marsh where a river comes down to the sea. A temple stood on that ground at Brauron, with a stone stair going down to the water. Athenian families walked their daughters out along that road every few years. The reason they did it is a story about an accident, and it is a small one. A tame bear lived at the sanctuary, and the local children fed it and played with it. One day the animal caught a girl with its claws, the way animals do in play. Her brothers killed the bear for it, which any brother in any village would do. Sickness came into Athens after that, and would not leave the city alone. The oracle was consulted, and the answer named the bear and named the price. From then on, the daughters of Athens had to serve the goddess before they married. Girls between 5 and 10 years old came out to Brauron in saffron dresses. They ran races on the temple ground and moved in lines with their arms out. The word for what they were doing means to act the bear, and that is the point. A city paid for one dead animal with its daughters, in installments, for centuries. Nobody in Athens ever announced that the debt had been settled and could stop. The same sanctuary held storerooms, and the inventories of them still exist. Women who had come through a birth alive sent their clothes to that temple. The list named the garments one by one, with the name of the woman who sent them: a tunic, a cloak, a child's dress, folded and shelved in a building by the marsh. Those are receipts, and they were kept the way a treasury keeps receipts. In Sparta, the arrangement was harder, and the site sits in the low ground by the river. The sanctuary of Artemis Orthia held a small wooden image that the priestess carried out. Boys of the city came to the altar there in front of a crowd for a contest. Pausanias went to Sparta and watched what happened at that altar in his own century. He writes that the rite was not finished until the stones of the altar were wet. The Greeks did not soften this, and they did not explain it as tradition either. Pausanias reports an older story in which the altar had once taken more than that. He says a lawgiver replaced the older practice with the ordeal to keep the substance. The substance was that the goddess of unmarried girls was owed something at that altar. Before a battle, the Athenians did not pray to the god of war for a good outcome. They sacrificed goats to Artemis of the Wild, because she was the one who ran with an army. Before Marathon, they vowed one goat for every enemy they killed that day. After the battle, they could not find that many goats anywhere in Attica. So the city settled on 500 goats a year, in perpetuity, as an installment plan. They were still paying that bill generations later, and nobody proposed dropping it. Now look at a map of where her sanctuaries actually stood in the Greek world. Not in the middle of the market, where the city put its own protecting gods. Her temples sit at harbor mouths, on passes, at river crossings, at the tree line. One of them stood on the mountain border between Sparta and Messenia, in the marshes. Pausanias says a quarrel at that border sanctuary set off a war between them. Two states fought for 20 years over what happened at a shrine on the line. That is a very Greek outcome for a building put exactly where two worlds meet. She is the goddess of edges, and every edge in that country had a stone for her. A traveler going over a pass left something small at the shrine at the top. A fisherman, coming into a harbor past her temple, did not speak while he passed it. Hunters had the strictest habits of all, and they were not about worship. A man who had a good day in the hills did not describe it loudly on the road. He hung the first animal on a branch at the shrine and went home without a speech. None of that is love, and no source pretends that anybody felt affection here. Look through everything we have and try to find her rewarding a favorite. Athena has favorites and works for them for 20 years across 2 poems. Apollo takes a city's side, teaches, heals, and gives a man a skill for life. Artemis has no protege, no rescued hero, and no city she saved in a bad year. What the offerings buy is not favor, and the Greeks were clear about what it was. They buy distance, which is the only good thing available in this relationship. Her brother could be dealt with because his anger had a cause you could see coming. He gets insulted, he acts, and afterwards there is a price, and the price gets paid. Dionysus punished people for refusing him, and the refusal was always deliberate. You could stay safe from both of them by not doing the specific thing they punished. There is no equivalent rule for the goddess in this video, and that is the whole problem. Actaeon did nothing. Callisto broke nothing. The daughters of Niobe said nothing. The king of Calydon missed one stone in a field on a busy morning. A girl came to Aulis in a covered cart for a wedding her father had invented. So the Greeks stopped looking for a rule of conduct and used geometry instead. They put her buildings where the plowed land stopped, and they kept the boundary maintained. In the museums now, she is the friendly one, and the labels are all about nature. She is used for brands, for teams, for anything that wants to sound clean and free. That version is a marble copy of a marble copy, and the original is a lot older. The original is a 3-year-old on her father's knee, reciting a list of terms. Nobody ever revised the list, and nobody in 900 years of stories renegotiated it. Guilt was never the question here, and innocence was never a defense anywhere. The only variable in every one of these stories is distance, and distance is manageable. Here is the last picture, and it is an ordinary evening somewhere in Greece. A hunter comes down off a pass at dusk with one animal over his shoulder. There is a small shrine at the side of the track, waist high, built out of field stone. He stops, lifts the animal up, and hangs it on the branch above the stone. Then he takes one arrow out of the quiver and lays it flat on the top of the shrine. He does not kneel, does not speak, and does not ask her for anything at all. He walks on down toward the smoke of the village without looking back once. Behind him, the brush closes over the track the way brush does in that country. Now go up the hill from the shrine, into the trees, where the light is already gone. There is water back in there, a spring coming out of the rock into a clear pool. The ferns around it are unbroken, and the stones on the floor of it are pale. No path leads down to that water from any direction on the mountain. There has never been a path, and there is not going to be one now. The Greeks made sure of that, and they made sure of it on purpose. They knew exactly what lives at the bottom of a quiet valley in the middle of the day. That is not a goddess anyone worshipped in the way we use that word. That is a rule about the edge of the world, kept by people who lost family learning it.